This is Lyqa Maravilla, a registered psychometrician, a trying hard educator, motivational speaker, and author. And it's time for us to share stories, insights, and lessons as we keep trying hard to be better together. Hi, and welcome to another Trying Hard podcast episode. Again, the goal of this podcast is to help each other keep pursuing your dreams kahit na natatawag na tayong trying hard or that maraming mga struggles or challenges in life. And in this episode, we're going to talk about ano ba yung ibig sabihin ng having a toxic mindset? Ano yung signs ng having a toxic mindset? Ano ba yung ibig sabihin ng toxic positivity? How do I deal with that? And yung medyo tricky na question, which is, if I am a believer or if I'm someone who adheres to positive thinking, ano yung limit ng positivity or limit ng faith-based na positivity na hindi siya tatawid into toxic positivity? Okay, so hahanapan natin yan ng sweet spot in this episode. But before we do that, just a quick little reminder, if you haven't subscribed or if you haven't followed this podcast yet, do click on follow para hindi nyo ma-miss yung mga upcoming episodes natin. We have more coming up with me, and I'm also trying to get some of my dearest friends to come on board. So we will do a number of collabs na rin soon. If you haven't listened to the episode that I made with Joyce Spring a few weeks back, and the really valuable discussion that I had with one of my mentors, si Attorney Janet Villa, you can visit yung iba pang mga podcast episodes dito, wherever you're listening, whether it's on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Okay? So, jump na tayo into it. Ano ba yung toxic mindset? Now, one of the things that people think about pag sinabi na toxic, lalo na sa panahon na online na ang lahat, is they use it as a name to brand other people. Okay? And that is not the goal sa podcast na ito. I don't want you to go around looking at your family or kahit sa timeline ninyo, scrolling through that, spotting kung sino itong mga toxic people in your life. That is not the goal of this podcast, okay? So if that is what you want to talk about, I think we can discuss that at a later date. But I want to prime you by saying this. I want to remind you dito sa passage nito in the Bible. In Matthew 7:3-5, Christ himself says, "Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, 'Let me take the speck out of your eye,' when all the time there is a plank in your own eye? You hypocrite! First take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye." Now, this passage right here has been used so many times in sermons. If you haven't listened to that yet sa inyong simbahan or sa inyong Bible study, if you are a Christian or if you are a Bible believer, magugulat ako, no? Kasi lagi siyang ginagamit. Pero I think hindi masyado siyang napapaalala sa konteksto ng online life natin. And ang simpleng ibig sabihin lang ng passage na yan is that before you go around telling people kung ano yung mali nilang ginagawa or ano yung dapat nilang ayusin sa sarili nilang buhay, we must first look at ourselves. So the goal here when we talk about having a toxic mindset or toxic positivity is for us to really examine ourselves. Na nandun na ba ako sa point na yun ng buhay ko na meron na akong toxic mindset? Hindi yung na meron na siya or meron na itong tao na to or itong institution na to or anyone else. Hindi yun ang goal natin. Ang goal natin is self-examination. Okay? And now that malinaw na yung intention na yan, we can jump into yung first point natin. Ano ba talaga yung toxic mindset? Now, again, hindi lang siya toxic positivity, which we'll talk about later. Basically, kung sisimplify natin yung definition nito, you can think of having a toxic mindset as having too much of anything. And alam natin na having too much of anything is bad. 'Di ba? Kahit na well-meaning tayo or kahit na maganda naman yung bagay na yun, kapag sumobra na, hindi na siya maganda. Okay? So, I will just talk about three of the things na pwedeng maging category ng having a toxic mindset. Yung first one is quite obvious, which is having too negative na mindset. So if, for example, anything happens and all you see are the bad things about it, even in things that are good or inherently good or pleasurable or wala namang masamang nangyari, as in it's really a good thing, you tend to look at things na negative pa rin. Parang nitpicky ka, naghahanap ka ng mali, and when good things happen, you feel like it's fake or that you don't deserve it or that it's not true. Parang laging may ulterior motive yung ibang tao, sobrang negative na ng thinking mo. So again, that is a form of toxic mindset. Now, another thing is yung having too positive na mindset, which we'll talk about later. I think it deserves its own category kasi. And yung third one is having a mindset that's too fixed. So when we say too fixed, ibig sabihin, masyado nang matigas yung ulo or masyado nang resistant to change. And in life, we look at progress, we look at improvement, you look at having a growth mindset as something that is actually going to be helpful to you. But if you're one of the people who hears yourself saying na ganito na akong pinanganak, ganito na akong mamamatay, or na mahina talaga ako sa math, hindi na yan magbabago, or I have a problem with my temper and ganito na lang yan, tanggapin niyo ako or leave me alone, something like that, then you may have too fixed na mindset. Masyado na siyang solid in your thinking na you leave no room for growth, you leave no room for improvement, and the problem with that is, di ba, limiting siya for you, and it can be frustrating then for the people around you. So again, those are just 3 examples of having a toxic mindset, pero there are others. Kaya lang I feel, itong tatlong to, ito yung mas madali nating makikita sa sarili natin. Now, if I'm to be honest, sa totoo lang, hindi malaking masyadong problema ko sa having a too fixed na mindset kasi I really love yung growth mindset. I love learning new things. I love changing for the better, and I encourage people to do that. Hindi rin naman ako too positive kasi very realistic ako sa buhay, and I like addressing things as they are. Pero dun sa may tendency ako dun sa too negative. And when I said kanina na part of having a mindset that's too negative is seeing the bad even in the best of situations, I tend to do that. Na even if something great happens, like for example, last year we crossed yung 1 million subscribers milestone for Team Lyqa, for my YouTube channel. And all I could think about was if I deserved it, or if the people who are subscribed to my channel actually get something from what I do. Na I tend to become too negative. So again, a lot of it is focused on recognizing these tendencies within ourselves, and that's mine. So just sharing that with you. Again, open heart surgery tong Trying Hard podcast for me. Okay? And do feel free to share your own thoughts then. Ano ba sa tingin nyo sa inyo na aspect ng having a toxic mindset? What do you want to work on? Okay? Now, if hindi pa tayo umabot sa point na nare-recognize na natin yun within ourselves, how do you know if you already are stuck in that loop of having a toxic mindset? Now, 3 things to look at na pwedeng maging signs of you having a toxic mindset are, number 1, your words. And when I say words, it's not just the words that you say out loud. Actually, mas malaking bahagi nito yung self-talk natin. Yung ano yung sinasabi natin sa sarili natin kapag mag-isa na tayo. Ano yung sinasabi ng thoughts sa brain natin sa sarili natin. Ano rin yung mga binubulong natin kapag alam natin na walang nakakarinig sa atin. So check your words. Like if we are to log everything that we say and think of, ano yung makikita ng mga tao dyan? Ano yung makikita mo dyan? Okay? Now, again, in my case, very obvious doon sa self-talk ko yung pagiging negative. So I do struggle with that, and I try to deal with that in a positive way. We'll talk about that then later. Now, another sign would be, kamusta yung behavior mo? Like if there is an abrupt change in behavior, a drastic change in behavior, that is one of the telltale signs. Or if yung, sometimes di ba na ano tayo, na gigising tayo sa sarili natin na, wait lang, I shouldn't have done that, na bakit ko yun ginawa, na I know I crossed a line but I couldn't help myself. So if you feel na parang I'm no longer in control with my behavior, or I always give in to my own tendencies when it comes to reacting to certain things, then that could also be a sign. Okay? Kung medyo dampener ka na. And leading up to yung third na sign ng having a toxic mindset, how are you when it comes to your relationships? Like if you ask the people around you, what will they say about you? Are you a pleasant person to be with? Are you too pleasant naman din to be with? Are you honest? Are you in denial? Are you helpful? Are you selfish? Like all of these relationships, the people you trust to say kung ano yung totoo about you, you can start asking them, kamusta ako? Kamusta yung mindset ko? Tingin nyo ba yung language ko is helpful, is good? Or am I being too negative? Do you think naman, am I being too positive? Or do you feel scared every time na you're going to say something sa akin kasi baka pag kinriticize ninyo ako, mag-flare up ako or magalit ako. Kasi that can be a sign of having a too fixed naman na mindset. So again, take stock of all these things, your words, your behavior, and your relationships. And maybe you can gauge kung nasang level ka na. Okay? And of course, just emphasizing here that no matter how deep it is na kung nasaan ka ngayon, there is always room for change. Okay? Yan. So we already talked about yung signs of having a toxic mindset, yung mga common types ng toxic mindset, and now pag-uusapan na natin yung toxic positivity. Okay? Now, a lot of people, especially Bible believers, professing Christians, or honestly anyone who adheres to some sort of religion or belief or the power of positive thinking, they struggle with yung toxic positivity. And there is a very self-aware question na pwede na itanong nyo sa sarili nyo, which is, in my wanting to choose to see things in a positive light, am I already practicing toxic positivity? So, I will first set the tone here by quoting another passage in the Bible, no? And I hope that even if you're non-religious, you find a bit of value in this argument. Kasi nga, ang idea sometimes is sweep yung problems under the rug. And if you look at toxic positivity, that's a very simple metaphor for it. But I try to measure things by looking at what Christ did while he was on earth. And if you look at the passage sa John 16:33, actually in the entire chapter sa John 16, you hear Christ enumerating the kinds of trials, turmoils, challenges that you are want to, hindi na you want to, but you want or you are inclined to experience in your life or in Christian living. And it's really a very scary list of things. But in John 16:33, what he says is this, and this is the end of that chapter. It says, I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. And then the last part is this, in this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world. And if you break down that passage, may dalawang components siya, which is this, acknowledging how dire the situation is and the fact that you will have trouble. And then after acknowledging that, doon na pumapasok yung take heart, I have overcome the world. And if you look at toxic positivity is basically slapping on a quote or a verse or encouragement or a prayer to your problem. This really doesn't fit that definition. Okay? Bakit? Kasi kasama dun yung how do we deal with the world. Even if you look at the basic tenets ng commandments or ng covenant, ng New Testament covenant, it says, di ba, love God with all your heart, love your neighbor as yourself. So, hindi lang siya all about God, all about faith. Dapat kasama yung pagiging relevant. Kasama yung pagiging helpful to your neighbor, pagiging in tune with the problems of the world. And now, why is this so different dun sa idea ng toxic positivity? Now, let me define toxic positivity in my own terms, okay? But of course, looking at a lot of readings and resources online, ang toxic positivity is more than having an interest sa motivational videos or quotes or advice or anything like that. Toxic positivity is choosing and or forcing a happy and optimistic state across all situations while ignoring, denying, or minimizing reality and real life, real human emotions. Now, that is how I choose to define it kasi breakdown natin, no? Number one, it's choosing and or forcing a happy and optimistic state. Ano ibig sabihin nun? Hindi ka lang namimili na maging positive. Okay? So sometimes people even force it or enforce it sa ibang tao. Ibig sabihin, wag mo nang isipin yung problema mo. Or hindi ka talaga depressed, walang depression. It's just, kulang ka lang sa prayer. Or magiging okay din ang lahat. When in fact, a person needs more than just words of reassurance. They actually need help. Now, the second line goes na it's, di ba, choosing and or forcing a happy and optimistic state. across all situations. Ibig sabihin, again, no matter how dire the situation is, people say na ang gamot dito is just a happy and optimistic state. When in fact, hindi nga siya laging enough. Like sometimes, of course, it can be helpful in priming you for your next decision, pero marami pang ibang needs that need to be met bago maging enough yung happy and optimistic state na yon. Tapos, ang kasunod na sa definition is while ignoring, so hindi pinapansin, denying, sinasabi na hindi ito totoo, or minimizing reality. Ibig sabihin, ang OA naman ng reaction mo, kaya maliit na bagay lang yan, hindi yan dapat pinoproblema. Or one thing na people used to tell me when I was at a point of depression, which is, ano bang nirereklamo mo? Sarap na nga ng buhay mo. Right? And iniisip mo lang yan, yung mga ganon. And real human emotion. So it's not just reality or the situation that they're minimizing, pero pati yung emotion ng ibang tao. So if I am asked to define toxic positivity, this is my definition of that. So how do we know then if what we're practicing or what we're doing counts as toxic positivity? I guess the first question here would be, what do you say and do when you're faced with a problem? Like if right now something bad happens, wag naman sana, no? Pero ano yung instant na reaction at ano yung una mong sinasabi? Okay, how do you deal with problems? And pangalawa, how do you deal with negative emotions? If you run away from it, okay? If you think that avoiding it, if you say na, huwag natin ito pag-usapan, di ba? Or tama na yan, or ayoko na. And then you just walk off every time na there's a difficult na situation, every time sabi natin nag-aawa yung mga anak mo or may pagtatalo kayong magkakapatid, then it may not be a healthy way of dealing with things. Kasi, alam nyo, fixing problems, dealing with them is really a very tedious and painstaking na task yan. Masakit talaga yan. But if you really want to deal with it properly, you have to face it. Now, the next question would be, how do I fix it then? How do I break through from having a toxic mindset? Whether it's too much positivity, too much negativity, or too much na pagiging matigas ang ulo, or being too firm, being too resistant to change. Now, 3 quick tips that I'll leave you with. The first one would be to cultivate self-awareness. So I really think that self-awareness is one of the skills or one of the tools na a lot of people don't use. And it's usually people who have a toxic mindset who don't practice it. Bakit? Kasi ayaw nila to be alone with their thoughts. So I will challenge you, my dear listener, to ask yourself this question. How comfortable are you with being alone with your own thoughts? Being alone with yourself, with being forced to examine who you are and being faced with the reality that you are not perfect. Kasi if we see ourselves as mga bida sa sarili nating pelikula ng buhay all the time, then we will have trouble with self-awareness. So again, think about that, okay? And there is a passage in the Bible in Psalm 139:23-24. The psalmist says, "Search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there's any offensive way in me and lead me in the way everlasting." So one of the ways then that we can cultivate self-awareness would be to pray that prayer. Search me, O God. Tell me saan nanggagaling tong anxious thoughts ko. See if may anything offensive sa ginagawa ko, sa behavior ko, sa words ko, and lead me in the way everlasting. It's actually one of the hardest prayers to pray. And when you pray it with your heart and you actually ask for it, I want you to be prepared sa isang shaking sa inyong buhay. Pero out of that can come an even stronger you, and a bolder you, a more effective you, a more grounded you. And I say that with conviction kasi that's basically what happened with me. Just the other day, Zandy, my right-hand woman, asked me, what are the prayers that you prayed to get you to this point? Kasi I will say this boldly, no, one of the hardest prayers to pray was something like that sa akin. Like, Lord, am I who people tell me na I am? I want to really know kung sino po ako. And with that came like a lot of struggles, a lot of changes in my life. But I'm grateful that I prayed that prayer because it made me who I am today. Another prayer that I prayed was, Lord, hindi na po ako kontento in knowing of you. I want to know who you are. And again, with that came a lot of challenges. We will probably talk about that in later episodes. So don't forget to follow this podcast. But it made me who I am today. So again, cultivate self-awareness. Like, you really have to know yourself and not be scared about your own weaknesses. Because if you come face to face with them, that's the time that we can start changing things. Now, the second thing that you could do would be to seek wise counsel. Okay? Ask people who are wiser than you, the people around you, your mentors, your disciples, your teachers, if you have those. Find someone who will be brutally honest with you and ask them kung ano yung pwede niyong gawin. Now, if you don't have anyone like that in your life, and I completely understand that kasi for the first 2 decades of my life, I literally had no one to turn to. What you could do would be to look around, look at the people that you look up to, whether na-meet nyo na sila personally or online nyo lang nakikita. And look at their stories, look at their learnings. Look at the videos that they probably made, the podcasts that they have, and look at yung mga lessons na natutunan nila in life. And see if there's any intersection dun sa kung nasan ka ngayon and try to apply that in your own life. One of the things that I love asking people that I've met that I really look up to is, ano po yung most valuable lesson that you learned? And whatever that they say, I try my best to apply it in my own life. So again, that's a good way to go. Seek wise counsel. Kasi hindi enough yung puro self-awareness lang. Sometimes doon nagiging matigas yung ulo eh. Sabihin, wala na, hindi na ako magbabago kasi this is who I am. So we always have to be open to that. And yeah, we are who we are, but that doesn't mean na hindi na tayo pwedeng mag-improve. Okay? And having people around you who will call you out, who will say things as they are, is really going to help. And then your third one would be to practice positive coping mechanisms. I think this one deserves another episode, no? Kasi maraming pwedeng pag-usapan tungkol sa negative coping mechanisms tsaka positive coping mechanisms. Pero one of the things that I try to employ is yung problem-solving na techniques. Okay? And one of the quickest ways to explain this, I think I already mentioned this then in a YouTube video and in my TikTok account. But the way I deal with things is now before now what? This is actually patterned after yung the way that, again, Christ deals with yung situations while he was here. And if you look at even the passage that we used kanina, John 16:33, it's the same pattern. Now, before, now what? You have to first acknowledge the situation, state things as they are, face the reality of how grim the situation can be. So again, number one, acknowledge the situation. Ask yourself, ano muna yung nangyayari right now before you ask yung now what question. Ano ba yung sabihin ng now what? That's the time that you need to address all of the issues. So again, nakita ko na yung sitwasyon, I already have a full lay of the land, nakita ko na yung struggles and how difficult it is. And then, pag nakita ko na yon, that's the time that I address the issues. I look for solutions, I ask for help, I look around, I use the skills that I have to address the issues. Now, bakit to importante? This is actually going against everything that toxic positivity stands for, which is basically refusing to state things as they are. Kasi maging positive lang tayo lahat, everything will be okay. When in fact, very important na alam mo muna yung situation before you address the issues. Bakit? Kasi diba in the same way na before tayo iinom ng gamot para sa katawan natin, nagkakaroon muna ng diagnosis, nagkakaroon muna ng mga lab tests and everything else para makita mo na kung ano talaga yung sakit. Dapat ganun din tayo sa problema. Kasi kung iinom tayo ng gamot or magbibigay tayo ng solusyon that is not sakto or relevant to the situation at hand, then what we could do would be do more damage than good. Sometimes din, nangyayari kung hindi natin masyadong ina-acknowledge yung situation, ginagamot natin yung surface symptoms, di ba? Pero hindi natin ginagamot yung mas malalim na issue. For example, if you struggle with, sabihin na natin, your anger issues, di ba? Your temper, medyo mabilis akong magalit. Or I use, for example lang I'm not saying na ganito ako, no? Pero if, for example, you use cuss words when you're mad and that is what you're trying to fix. When in fact, ang mas malalim na tanong dun is, what pushes you to use your words to hurt people? So it's an even deeper issue. Is it grounded sa experience when you were a kid? Meron ka ba talagang anger control issues? Like, ano ba yung mas malalim na problema doon? Kasi if you're going to say na, okay, I will put a swear jar dito na every time I cuss, maglalagay ako ng pera. That can cure the symptom, pero yung anger issue nandun pa rin. So again, when it comes to problem solving, think about now before now what. Okay? And that's how I try to do things. So again, in this episode, I know it's a bit long, but I wanted to explain things as best as I could, no? And really cover as much ground as possible. We talked about some of the things nagiging clue or signs of having a toxic mindset. Ano yung mga kadalasan na form ng having a toxic mindset, having too fixed of a mindset, having a too negative mindset or a too positive na mindset. We talked about toxic positivity, signs, and what you could do. And hopefully, you picked up a lesson or two from this podcast. Again, if you enjoyed this and you want to listen to more, go ahead and follow this podcast. We're available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all major podcast platforms. And if you want to interact with me, request topics, or if there's something that you picked up from here and you want to share with other people, you can use the hashtag Trying Hard with Lyqa. So hashtag Trying Hard with LYQA para mahanap natin yung mga comments ninyo. And again, thank you for all who are interacting with the material, all of you who are tagging me sa mga quotes or sa mga stories ninyo. I really appreciate that a lot. And for sharing this podcast to your friends as well. So, I know a lot of you listen to these parang once a week or inuunti-unti nyo siya kasi binababad nyo or you're trying to really understand yung mga sinasabi ko sa podcast nito. I appreciate that level ng intensity sa conversation na ito. One of my struggles when I started was that na parang sabi ko baka masyadong mabigat yung episodes. Pero the fact that you appreciate it and you learn something from it really gives me encouragement. So, thank you sa inyong lahat. And again, dito sa podcast na ito, sana we can stay true to our pact or our goal, which is to be trying hard people, you know, to have big dreams, work really hard for it, and not be ashamed when people call us tryhards. Because at the end of the day, again, we can only be better versions of ourselves. And I am so happy that you're joining me in my quest to be that. Okay? Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you on the next episode na lang. Bye for now.